Well, good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to our brand new webinar. This is IATF Rules 6th edition, Overview of Key Changes. My name is Joseph Krolikowski. I am the QMS Program Manager for Perry Johnson Registrars. My colleague, Shannon Craddock, our Programs and Accreditation Manager, is also with us today. So we're looking forward to sharing some new information on the IATF certification with you today. A couple of notes for everybody. All of you are on mute, but we absolutely want to address your questions. So we ask that you please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We will be addressing questions at the end of our presentation. Now, one of the more common questions that we get is whether or not the presentation will be available after we're finished. As this is a brand new webinar, you'll need to bear with us just a bit, but we do make our presentations available in two ways. Firstly, if you'd like to get a copy of the slides will be available for download on our website. You'll look for the link entitled Past Webinar Slides. And if you'd like to rewatch the presentation with the voiceover, or perhaps share it with a colleague, we do post all of our webinar recordings to our YouTube page. And the link for that is also available on our website under past webinars. Now, if you have any questions on this, you can reach out to our team at pjr@pjr.com with any additional questions that you may have. Our topics for today, we're going to be going over what is IATF Rules 6th edition and who enforces it. We're going to cover what this has to do with you. I'm going to presume that most of our guests today are representing a company that is certified or seeking certification to IATF 16949. We're going to have some discussion on the significant changes that are impacting the clients. I'll have a couple of concluding remarks, and then we will address your questions. Now, in terms of what is IATF Rules 6th edition, well, IATF, you may or may not know, stands for International Automotive Task Force, and they are responsible for publishing two key documents that impact automotive quality management system certification. Now, the first of these, presumably you're well familiar with, it's the IATF 16949 standard itself. Now, this is the primary document that any company manufacturing a product in the automotive supply chain, when they get audited by PJR, this is the primary document that we're holding you accountable to. Now, when we talk about the IATF rules, understand that this is the primary document that PJR is held accountable to, as we are an accredited certification body. Now, the official title is rather lengthy. It's Automotive Certification Scheme for IATF 16949, Rules for Achieving and Maintaining IATF Recognition. Now, throughout our presentation today, I've simplified the reference. We're going to be referring to it as R6. Now, in terms of who enforces the R6 requirements, that falls to what are referred to as the oversight offices. And there are 5 official oversight offices representing 5 different countries and territories. Now, here in the United States, the oversight office is the IAOB in Southfield, Michigan. Now, PJR's accreditation, as we are a United States-based certification body, our accreditation is issued through the IAOB. Now, obviously, you're wondering, what does this have to do with you? What does this have to do with your company? Well, the IATF rules impact your certification in a number of ways. This is where, for example, audit duration comes from. This is what we refer to in terms of, are you eligible for certification? This is where, when we tell you you have X number of days to accomplish a task, that's usually because it's spelled out in the rules. Now, with Rule 6, the IATF has introduced some changes that are going to impact you. Now, in our estimation, all of our clients are going to be impacted by these changes, some to a lesser degree, some to a significant degree. Now, R6 compliance is going to be mandatory the first of the year in 2025. Now, if you need a copy of R6, it can be purchased direct from the IATF. You just go to globaloversight.org and you can find the links to purchase it. Now, our presentation today, we're going to be going over 4 primary categories of change. We're going to start with eligibility. We're going to move into audit planning and timeline changes. We're going to talk a little bit about the changes to audit duration, and we're going to close out with changes impacting the process for responding to a nonconformance. I've also got a couple of slides of miscellaneous changes. So let's start with eligibility. Now, one of the key hallmarks of IATF 16949, going all the way back to when it was called TS 16949, is that it's always been intended exclusively for companies that manufacture a product that's used in the manufacture of an automobile. Now, the older versions of the rules, they had language about it being exclusive to cars and trucks and heavy trucks and motorcycles and so forth. R6 introduces some verbiage changes that are intended to provide some clarity on what types of products are IATF 16949 eligible. Now, the first of these changes is the use of the term homologation. Now, homologation is a term that is defined in Section 10 of R6, and it's defined as the whole vehicle approval process that results in a government-issued certificate that allows a vehicle to be sold in a particular market. Now, that term, homologation, is used in Section 1 of R6, where it says that only organizations that manufacture and, where applicable, design and develop automotive products and vehicles are eligible for IATF certification. And then in Section 1, it says that automotive vehicles means homologated vehicles intended to be driven on public roads. So to bottom line it, if the vehicle is primarily intended for public roads, so that's going to include cars, buses, motorcycles, heavy trucks, etc., all of the parts that make up the manufacture and assembly of that vehicle are going to qualify for IATF 16949 certification. Now, there is some language in the rules that, for example, if you are involved in extracting iron ore, if you're in mining, well, we could make the argument that iron ore is going to eventually end up being used to make the frame of the vehicle. Mining is not IATF 16949 eligible. And that's actually explained on this slide here. You'll note that they use the term automotive products. And this is also given a special explanation in Section 1 of Rule 6. And here's what it says that term includes. Automotive products is going to include parts, including with embedded software, and processed materials, which are manufactured to an automotive customer specification and integrated into the vehicle during its manufacture. Now, those are usually referred to as production parts. There's a further definition given for the term processed materials. Now, this is usually going to be referring to bulk materials that are used in the manufacturing process. Now, this is going to include ingots, filaments, sheets, etc. And as I said earlier, the raw material, the mining, excavation, etc., is not eligible. But if your organization, for example, prepares aluminum ingots that are used for automotive manufacturing, the manufacture of those ingots is potentially eligible for IATF certification. It goes on to explain that parts manufactured to OEM specs that are procured or released by the OEM and integrated, here's the key part, into the vehicle after its manufacture and before or after delivery to the final customer. This is a key note, and this is a very significant change because now IATF certification can include aftermarket products. Now, if we've got anybody here on the call that's been IATF certified for any amount of time, you know that aftermarket products were previously excluded from certification. They are now IATF eligible. So replacement parts and materials for automotive vehicles, service parts, aftermarket products, all of these are now eligible. They've really thrown open the doors on what you can get IATF 16949 certified for, much more so than we had on the previous versions of the rules.
Joe?
Yes.
I see that this slide is going to address my question on the fact that I may be a manufacturing site that makes both production and aftermarket parts. This is interesting. Please go ahead.
Correct. Some of the folks on our call today, you may be in a situation where you are manufacturing both production parts and aftermarket parts. Now, a key thing for you to bear in mind, if you are manufacturing an aftermarket product and it is an automotive product, in the past, you may have had the option of saying, I don't want these aftermarket products to be included in the audit process. Maybe you haven't prepared a control plan for these products. Maybe you haven't gone through the process of getting your gauge systems analyzed using an MSA study. What we have been told is that if it qualifies, it has to be included in the audit. And again, that's a key change. So starting in 2025, if you happen to have aftermarket products that are automotive, those products are going to be newly included in the audit process. Obviously, this new language also means that if you exclusively manufacture an aftermarket product, it is now eligible for IATF 16949 certification. So again, reach out to us if you've got questions on this point. We realize for some of you, this is a significant change. Another significant change has to do with extended manufacturing sites. Now, quickly, for those who may not be aware, an extended manufacturing site has long been understood as an adjunct facility to a manufacturing facility. And typically, it is an extension of the manufacturing going on in that facility. So it's additional stamping lines or additional powder coating lines, or it might be, for example, a standalone paint facility. You know, paint's kind of messy, smelly. Maybe they build a separate building across the parking lot to handle the paint operations. Well, under the older version of the rules, there was a little more leeway in terms of what could qualify for an extended manufacturing site. Under Rule 6, they have made some rather significant changes. Firstly, they have decreed that all extended manufacturing sites have to be no more than 10 miles from the manufacturing site they support. And the extended manufacturing site can also not be more than an hour's drive from the manufacturing site that it supports. Now that is, for some of you, that's a significant change. And we recognize that we're going to probably have to have some discussions with a few of you. But again, this is the language that's in the rules. And I promise you, we questioned this aggressively. And we were told that this is the new requirement. Additionally, and again, for a couple of you, this is actually good news. There is some new language about management personnel being on site at an extended manufacturing site. Now, in the past, the intention was that management team members could not be at the extended manufacturing site. You could not, for example, if you had the president of the company, if their office was at the extended manufacturing site, or a sales office was on site at the extended manufacturing site. That was an issue. That often led to that building being treated as a full site. Under Rule 6, now we are allowed to have some leeway on this. And here's the exact verbiage. Management personnel may be located at an extended manufacturing site, provided that these personnel are responsible for controlling and managing their relevant area of responsibility at both the site and the extended manufacturing site, not just the extended manufacturing site. So I've had clients in the past that have said to me, you know, my two buildings are across a parking lot from each other. Why does it matter where someone's desk is? And so to them, I say, okay, we've got some leeway on this now. Now, if you happen to be in a situation where you have an extended manufacturing site that will no longer qualify for extended manufacturing site designation under R6, if you have, for example, an extended manufacturing site that's more than 10 miles away from your main facility, you basically have two options. You can transition the extended manufacturing site to a full site certification, potentially as part of a campus scheme, or assuming that your customers do not have any objection, you do have the option of removing the extended manufacturing site from your certification, and you can operate it as an uncertified facility. Now, when it comes time for us to schedule your 2025 audit, we're going to need you to have decided how you want to proceed with this. And again, we will be discussing this with you on a case-by-case basis. Now, the next major area of impact is going to be in the area of planning and timeline. And they've really ramped up the expectations here. There's quite a bit of what I would call aggressive change in this next section here. Now, to begin with, they have made it mandatory that the dates of your audits need to be confirmed no less than 90 days before the audit is slated to begin. Now, many of you on the call are probably thinking, that's great. You know, I want to know when my audit is going to take place, and that's true. But this also impacts our ability to change audit dates once we've arranged them for you. It makes last-minute scheduling difficult and so forth. So again, but officially the requirement is 90 days or more, we must have your dates arranged. Now, 30 days or more, we must have your pre-audit planning data. Now, all of the versions of the IATF rules have required that organizations provide certain information, whether this is going to include scorecards, KPI performance, management review, etc. We have to get all of this in advance of the audit so that the audit team can be prepared for the audit and to develop the audit plan. Now, in the past, if the data wasn't provided, we had the option to add some on-site audit time to give the auditor a chance to review that information before the audit took place. Under Rule 6, that permissiveness has been removed. Now, please pay very close attention to what I'm about to say here. Starting in 2025, if we don't get the pre-audit planning information 30 days or more in advance, we are required to delay your audit. Now, our ability to delay the audit in a lot of cases is going to be very limited. We have a finite number of auditors, and all of them have very full calendars. Rule 6 goes on to state that delaying the audit may result in a loss of certification. So if we don't get your pre-audit planning data from you on time, it may put us in a situation where we are forced to revoke your certificate. Now, obviously, we do not want to do that, but the new language in the rules is very severe. So again, when your scheduler reaches out and says, I need this information, they mean it. We need that information, or we are going to be in a situation where we may have to revoke your certificate. Now, some of you may have in the past had to endure a short suspension for not conducting your surveillance audit on time. Now, in the past, we were allowed to suspend a certificate for a period of time if the audit didn't take place on time. Now, in this instance, on time means no more than 3 months prior or 3 months after the anniversary date of your last stage 2 or recertification audit. Excuse me. Now, the fact that we're no longer suspending the certificates is obviously a good thing. However, if your surveillance audit does not take place on time, we are required to revoke the certificate. So basically, think of it this way. You're no longer getting the warning of your certificate being suspended in the database. You'll still be hearing from us. Our schedulers are still going to be trying to work with you and get the audit scheduled and so forth. But in terms of what's going to happen in the database, we're going to go from issued to revoked if the audit does not take place on time. Now, I've got a special section here. This is not entirely new under Rule 6, but it's the requirement has been changed in a significant way. Now, you may or may not be aware, the IATF rules, and this goes back to first edition of the rules, it mandates that interactions between manufacturing sites and their support locations have to be audited from both sides. So what we mean by that is, if you have a manufacturing site in Detroit and you have a sales office in Chicago, PJR is required to audit both the manufacturing site and the sales office. And we have to confirm that think of it this way, that the story we're being told in Detroit about what Chicago does is the same thing we're seeing in Chicago. So it has to be audited from both sides. Now, we have a few clients that have more than one support location, one or more, I should say, where the certification is through another certification body. So for example, in our example of a manufacturing site in Detroit, the sales office in Chicago is certified by NSF. That's an example. Now, more commonly, where this happens is when it is an international support location. If the sales office is in Tokyo, Japan, or the sales office is in Beijing, China, something like that. So in that situation, PJR has to work with the audit report from the other certification body. And again, those two sides need to agree with each other. If the PJR audit report says that the support location is providing purchasing and supplier management and warehousing support, and the NSF report says only purchasing and supplier management, that's a problem. That's a concern. And it's something that you, the client, needs to help us resolve. The audit reports need to align with each other. And if the other CB's audit report either doesn't mention our client or the manner of support isn't consistent, that's an issue. So in
Joe, I have a question on that.
Yes.
Does that mean that me, as the certified client, has to take ownership of this and communicate to my other certification body that there may be sites audited by another CB that they need to verify linkages with?
100%.
I'm responsible for this as the client?
100%, yes. You have to understand that PJR does not have the ability to reach out to the other certification bodies. That is, we're not allowed to do that effectively. So when we get word that you're getting support from, say, an office in Tokyo, Japan, and here's the support that's provided, the audit report from that other CB needs to be consistent with what we're seeing at your facility. And if it isn't, you need to work with your colleagues in Japan and tell them, look, we need this audit report to be updated, or we need you to do an audit and audit the support that we're receiving from you. And this is not something that we can do for you. This is something that you need to manage internally between yourselves and the colleagues at the support offices, wherever they may be. And this is actually outlined in Rule 6. In Section 553, it says that if we can't use the report from the other certification body, again, we have to delay the audit until that other CB's report is updated. And again, delaying the audit is going to be difficult and may lead to certificate revocation. So the planning phase is hugely important. It's always been hugely important, but they've really stepped up the rhetoric in Rule 6 in terms of making sure that everything is ready to go on audit day. Let's talk a little bit about relocations. Now, in the past, we had some leeway in terms of how we could treat a site move. Now, in Rule 6, Section 515, there's a whole new section for relocation, and it indicates that an initial audit is required for all situations involving a site, extended manufacturing site, or a support location moving from one building to another, and this does include moving across the street. Now, when they say initial audit in this context, this means a stage 1 and a stage 2 audit in most cases. Now, if what we're talking about is a support location being moved, we are allowed some discretion. So in other words, if you're moving a sales office, if you're moving a management office, in that situation, we may say, okay, it doesn't make sense to do a stage 1, stage 2 in that situation. But if we're talking about a testing laboratory, if we're talking about a warehouse with a testing laboratory attached to it, that's more significant. And we may decide that, you know what, we really do need to do a full initial audit, including a stage 1 and stage 2. Now, as a reminder, in Section 3.2 of Rule 6, and this is actually carrying over from prior versions, we must receive prompt advance notice of any plans for a relocation or any other change that's going to impact your certification. So don't make PJR the last phone call when you are making changes within your automotive quality management system. Now, some of you may have heard that remote audits are going to be a possibility under Rule 6. Currently, if we have a remote audit request, it has to be approved in advance via a waiver process. Now, we're getting a little bit of leeway on this starting in 2025. We will be allowed some limited remote auditing, and here's the criteria. The location can only be a support location, in other words, not a manufacturing site, and furthermore, there can be no product handling or design responsibilities. So if we're talking about, for example, it's a warehouse, it's not eligible for remote auditing. If we're talking about a facility that provides packaging services, it's not eligible for remote audit. If it's product testing, it's not eligible for remote audit, and so forth. So let's say it's a sales office. Okay, it is eligible for a remote audit. The audit in question must be a surveillance audit. And furthermore, the most recent surveillance audit cannot also have been done remotely. So let me bottom line this for you. You're allowed to have a qualifying support location be assessed virtually once every 3 years during the surveillance cycle. So as you can see, it's not that generous. Furthermore, if you have had a failed stage 1 audit, the follow-up stage 1 audit can also be remote. That's one additional permission. But again, not a whole lot of give in this situation. The vast majority of the IATF audits are going to still be on site per usual. Let's transition now to audit time changes. Now, this is going to include on-site and off-site. I want to very quickly preface, when we're talking about off-site time in this context, we're referring exclusively to audit planning time. The off-site time that's going to be reflected in your contracts is going to be more than just the planning time. There's more to it with off-site audit time. So let's begin with, as alluded to, audit planning time. Now, under the previous version of the rules, we were given a certain amount of leeway in how much planning time we would assign to give the auditors time to review that planning information that we talked about a few slides ago, the KPI data, the scorecards, the management review information, what have you. Now, Rule 6, Clause 5.7 mandates that each site and each support location receives a minimum of half a day of billable off-site planning time. Now, again, that's not the entire amount of off-site time that's going to be assigned to that location. It's just the amount that pertains to audit planning. Now, there are a couple of provisos on this. If a manufacturing site has a dedicated support location, if there's a warehouse across the parking lot, we are permitted to assign a single pool of audit planning time to the audit at our discretion and based on auditor feedback. If the support location is providing support to multiple manufacturing sites, it's likely that we're going to have to provide our auditor with a dedicated pool of audit planning time for just the support location. Now, you're going to be expected to provide pre-audit planning data for sites and for support locations. Bear in mind that the data required for a support location will not be as extensive as that required for a site. Now, many of you have gone through at least one audit and you know about our audit planning checklist, our F108TS data. The F108TS data has been completely overhauled to include new prompts for this information. Let's talk a little bit about corporate schemes. There have been a few changes for our clients that utilize the corporate scheme option. For those who don't know, what a corporate scheme means is you have 2 or more manufacturing sites, possibly with 1 or more support locations, that share a common quality management system, a common upper management team, and a central location. This is usually referred to as headquarters by most companies. Now, the most important of these changes for the corporate scheme folks has been the elimination of the tiered audit time reduction table from Rules 5th, Clause 5.3. Under that table, you were allowed to reduce the audits by up to 40%. Under Rule 6th edition, corporate scheme client audit time reductions are capped at 15%, and that's regardless of the number of participating sites. Now, if you've got a copy of Rule 6, I would direct you to the 3rd paragraph of Clause 5.3. So for some of you, if you have multiple sites in a corporate scheme, this is going to have a significant impact on your audit durations. Your audits are going to be longer in 2025 than they would have been in prior years, depending on how deep a reduction you were getting.
Joe, so if I had 17 sites, for example, and had a 40% reduction due to the fact that I was a corporate scheme, that
Right.
discount is going to be reduced?
Correct.
25% to only 15%?
Correct, correct. Yes, the corporate scheme reduction is capped at 15%. And that is, you could have 200 sites, and the maximum discount for a corporate scheme is now 15%. My current slide actually talks about this a bit more. Under the older versions, we had a couple of generous audit time reductions. As I said earlier, up to a 40% reduction for corporate scheme, and up to a 50% reduction if a company was transitioning from a letter of conformance to a full certification. Now, the reduction allowances have been reduced and in some cases eliminated in Rule 6. So if a company, for example, doesn't provide any product design, that's a 15% reduction. Corporate scheme is now capped at 15%. Companies upgrading from ISO 9001, 30%. Now, if you qualify for a couple of these, let's say that you don't design your products, you're part of a corporate scheme, and you're upgrading from ISO 9001. If we add those up, that should be a 60% reduction. The maximum discount is 30%, regardless of how many discounts you qualify for. So again, for some of our clients, this is going to mean a longer audit. Now, another key change in terms of the audit duration is going to be time added for verification of prior nonconformances. Now, under the prior version of the rules, we were given autonomy in deciding how much PNCR time was needed. Now, under Rule 6, Clause 5.20, it is mandatory for us to add 30 to 60 minutes for each minor nonconformance, unless those minors were already verified at a special audit. Now, I want to emphasize, PJR was already doing this. We were already being, I suppose you could say, risk averse and trying to add a significant amount of time for PNCR verification anyhow. So this part of it, this is not going to be a significant change for any of our current clients. Now, as prior indicated, each site and each support location will need a minimum of half a day of offsite planning time, with some exceptions, as we mentioned. I also want to mention, those of you that run 3 production shifts, you may have had situations in the past where your auditor performed a single 12-hour audit day. That permission has been removed. Audit day duration has now been capped at 8 hours of audit time and up to 2 hours of additional audit time. And additional audit time is for things like previous nonconformance verification, translation, etc. But the audit day itself is capped at 8 hours. So if you have off shifts, if you have a third shift, for example, the auditor is going to have to stagger their time to accommodate that shift. But the days of doing a 12-hour day, those days unfortunately are over. So for some of you, this may mean where, for example, you might have been able to get the audit done in 4 calendar days. Now it's going to stretch into 5 calendar days because the 12-hour day is no longer allowed. Another item that's new, under Rule 6, Clause 5.2Q, if you have an IATF OEM customer, if you're selling direct to Ford or GM or Stellantis or whatnot, and you have an underperforming scorecard, we are required to add a minimum of 4 additional audit hours up to a maximum of 8 additional audit hours to enable our auditor time to investigate that scorecard and the issues therein. Lastly, Rule 6, Clause 5.2G mandates that a manufacturing site's minimum audit duration after we've applied all available discounts is 1.5 days for all audit types. I know we have a handful of clients that have had surveillance audits come in at a day. Unfortunately, that's no longer going to be allowed. If you've got a 3-person company, it's still going to be a 1.5 day minimum. for your surveillance audits. So again, longer audits and stretching into more calendar days. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-audit review process. Now, one of the things that it was kind of ballyhooed at the time, but it ended up being kind of a shifting of an activity. Many of you are no doubt well versed in the 1 hour of pre-audit review activity. This was something that was actually mandated in Rules 5th. And it was something that was supposed to take place prior to the opening meeting, the official opening meeting. And it was positioned as a re-review of the pre-planning information, most critically the customer scorecards, to make sure that the auditor had the most up-to-date information and to make any last-minute adjustments to his or her audit plan. Rule 6 has changed this process. The 1 hour event has been eliminated, but what they've done is they've mandated that the information needs to be reviewed during the opening meeting. So, and the opening meeting, of course, the management team is supposed to be present. So, in our estimation, this was done for a couple of reasons. One, making sure that management is committed to the success of the audit and is actively reviewing critical information such as scorecards. And two, they're making the review of this information a part of the audit itself. Now, bear in mind, the rules mandate that an audit can't be terminated once it has been started without suspension of the certificate. So again, we are still going to ask you for the most up-to-date scorecards when we get on site, but now it's going to be taking place as part of the opening meeting with everybody present, and that is by design. Let's talk about one more critical category of change, and that is the process for responding to a nonconformance. Firstly, let's talk a little bit about majors. Some of you may have been unfortunate enough to have received a major in one of your past audits, and you may remember that you were given up to 20 days to provide an initial response. That initial response has to include a correction containment statement with evidence, a root cause analysis, and a plan for corrective action. Under Rule 6, your timeline has been shortened from 20 days to 15 days. Now, we do have some leeway in terms of if that 15-day response is unacceptable, we are potentially allowed to give you a little bit more time. But again, the intent is that you're going to have your act together within this initial 15-day period. Also, one of the more stringent requirements of the IATF standard has always been that a major nonconformance means automatic certificate suspension and a mandatory special audit to confirm effective implementation of your corrective actions. Now, in the past, what was critical was verifying that everything was taken care of within 90 days. And we were allowed to do multiple special audits. You know, if we did a special audit at day 50 and things were getting there but not quite there, we could do another special audit at day 80 and still have everything be approved. Unfortunately, that latitude has been removed. Rule 6, Clause 511.4 stipulates that the special audit is a one-time event. If we can't make a full approval at that special audit, it's game over. The cert is withdrawn and you have to start over with a new initial audit. So bottom line, if you've had majors on an audit and you're going to be going through the special audit, make sure you're ready because you only get one shot at it.
Joe, I have a question.
Yes.
What if, talking about majors and that initial response at the 15-day mark, what if we see that it's not acceptable?
In the situation where the initial response is unacceptable, we are permitted an additional 15 days for the client to provide an improved response. Now, again, the intent is that you get it right the first time, but we do have some leeway in terms of providing you feedback and then turning it back around and sending us an updated, improved response. That is allowed.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, special audits can take place for a lot of other reasons, but if we're doing them for major and minor nonconformances or minor nonconformances, they have mandatory duration now. If there is, say, we're doing an audit for 3 majors and 2 minors, the minimum duration for that audit would now be 4 hours. And you can see why on my second bullet point here. If we're doing a special audit for a major, the minimum duration is 1 hour up to a maximum of 3 hours. If it's for a minor, the minimum duration is 30 minutes up to a maximum of 60 minutes. Now, this is regardless of what the NCR was written for. So if you had a major nonconformance because you had a situation with your training records, something that you may think we can look at in half an hour and be done. Unfortunately, under Rule 6, we have to make that special audit a minimum of 1 hour because it happened to be for a major. I'd like to talk a little bit about the open but 100% resolved protocol. Now, some of you on our call may have had to go through this in the past. In Rule 6, Clause 511.3, it mandates that corrective actions have to be verified within 90 days of the end of the audit. Now, whether that's through correspondence in the case of a minor nonconformance or through a special audit in the case of a major. Now, in some cases, it's just not possible to get everything done within 90 days. Let's say, for example, you need to get some very specialized training, and the training provider is not going to be available within 90 days. Or maybe it's a question of volume. Maybe you have 200 gauges that need to go through a MSA analysis, and that's too much to get done within 90 days. Well, in those situations, we're allowed to treat the item as open but 100% resolved and put off the verification beyond the 90-day period. It allows us to accept your response and do a special audit later in excess of 90 days. Now, what's changed in Rule 6 is, first of all, the mandatory special audit has to take place 90 days or more prior to the next regularly scheduled audit. So now in most cases, we were upholding this, but we definitely need to be very careful about this going forward. Also, this is brand new. You need to provide evidence, updated evidence of implementation of your delayed corrective actions 30 days or more prior to your special audit. And lastly, the special audit is a one-time event and it cannot be repeated. So if we show up to close out an open but 100% resolved item and it's not been effective, we're going to be in a situation where we have to revoke your certificate. So again, you want to time that audit carefully and make sure that you're truly ready for it. A couple of miscellaneous changes that are going to be impactful to our clients. In Clause 3.1H, it mandates that if a consultant is present and or participating in the audit, we are required to terminate the audit. Please note this includes direct and indirect participation. So the way it's been explained to us, if you're trading text messages with your consultant during the audit, we're required to terminate the audit. Now, we can't see what we can't see, but if we catch you doing it, we're supposed to terminate the audit. That's what I'll say about it. They're very, very strict on this. Section 511 has eliminated the possibility of a semi-annual surveillance audit. We've only got a handful of clients that go through their surveillance audit every 6 months. But what we've been told is that if you're in the midst of your surveillance cycle, let's say that you're due for surveillance audits 3 and 4 in 2025, you'll be allowed to close out your current cycle and transition to annual audits after your next recertification. But everyone else, the 6 and 9 month options have been removed. In Section 61C, it mandates that we are required to collect a new application from a client if any of its locations reopen following a closure or following a relocation event. So if you move, if you change locations, please understand that we have to send you a whole new application. We are working on this. We're going to try to have it be kind of a scaled back application if it's for a current client or a recent former client, but this is required. It's frustrating, but it's required. Another key change in clause 252E, PGR can no longer offer pre-assessment audits for IATF 16949. We've only had a handful of clients that have asked for them in the past, but yeah, the pre-assessment option is off the table now permanently. In section 6.1, there is a whole new list of required items that we must have in order to be able to quote for certification. And we've already had some consternation over this. The third bullet point especially, yes, we do need your interaction of processes map in order to quote you. You may think it unreasonable, but that's what it says in the rules. We need information on prior certifications to IATF 16949 from the last 3 years. We need your USI numbers if you have them. These should be shown on your current certificate. We need to know about your product design responsibility, a written declaration, past failed certification efforts from the last 6 months, past letters of conformity years, and so forth. So our application, as dense as it already was, has gotten even bigger, unfortunately, because of the information that we're required to collect. So Rule 6, as we've seen, it presents a whole host of new requirements that are going to impact, we figure, just about all of our current clients. We do hope that this presentation has been helpful in preparing for the new expectations coming in 2025. I'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. I have a presentation on our Pro 3 and related bylaws governing promotion of the management system certification. I'm actually, I believe, presenting that presentation tomorrow. So if you'd like to listen to me talk for an hour again, you're welcome to join us tomorrow for that presentation. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We also have a presentation on your ongoing relationship with PJR. This is an exploration of what to do when things change, as well as a discussion on our disputes process. And we have webinars on a whole bunch of other topics, process mapping, stage 1s, ISO 9001, and many other topics. If you'd like to stay connected, the best way for you to do that is to visit our website at www.pjr.com, enter your email address into the provided space, and click subscribe. You will be opted in for updates on new webinars, changes to the standard, and other helpful points of information. I do thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard. As a reminder, the slides and voiceover will both be accessible on our website shortly after we're finished. If you'd like to get a quote from our sales team, go ahead and hit that QR link, and that'll link you into our quotations process. Let's see if we have any questions on the dashboard here. Jennifer France has a nice compliment. Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to help. Any other questions today? Okay, wishing you all a great holiday season. Thank you so much.